as I mentioned earlier, we are going to talk about the last factor of the Eightfold Path, which is often called concentration. The Pali word is samadhi, and samadhi is usually or has always been translated as concentration. But over the last few years, I've heard different definitions, which I like a little bit better, which are like collectedness of mind, steadiness of mind. And I like them because, for me at least, and I've talked to a couple of people, concentration gives the idea that you're like bearing down and like, I got to get this right kind of thing. Concentrate, got to concentrate on this. When that's not it at all. That's not what concentration is at all. It's this steadiness. So I might say concentration, I might say samadhi, I might say collectedness, but I mean this steadiness of mind. So when that's what I'm talking about. It unifies the mind. And it's kind of this logical place that we end up after walking through this Eightfold Path. And it's not that, oh, you're done now, check off number 8 and you're done. The Eightfold Path, and I'll point to this as I talk, the Eightfold Path is something that we just get deeper and deeper and deeper into. It's not that you do it once and you're done, but it's this continual dropping down layer. And as you practice more and the qualities that are being talked about and the recognition of how they show up in your life get deeper, there's more awareness, more clarity, more wisdom, more compassion. They continue to rise. So my tattoo says I'm not dead, so I'm not done. So I'm going to be trotting this Eightfold Path for hopefully the foreseeable and unforeseeable future as well, because I can't see the future even though I think I can. So it's this steadiness of mind. What is true, though, is that we come by this, we have how many times have I heard people say when I tell them I teach meditation, they say, I can't meditate because my mind won't stop. And I'm sure you've all had that experience where you sit down and it's just like, that we come by that naturally. It's an evolutionary thing that has developed in our way of, watching is there danger, the fight, flight, or freeze type of thing. We have to take care of ourselves, but it's gotten passed down, so we come by it naturally. It's not anything we're doing wrong. We're kind of figuring out what's going on. What do I got to pick up on the way home? Blah, blah, blah. All those things. I'm hungry. What's for dinner? While we're doing other things. And so the practice is to recognize when we're distracted like that and to make the effort to really be present, because that's where liberation is. When we're not hooked into this craving or aversion, when we're not hooked into the hindrances, being pulled in directions, getting this thing in our head that says, that's not right, they should do this or I should do that. I parked next to a new Miata once, and I like Miatas. I had an old Miata, and I looked at that Miata, and I went home and said, I have to get a new Miata. Until I started looking online, and I went, no, I'm going to just keep the old one I have. This one's fine. So, but we get these things that lodge in our brains, and then we have to, or shoulds or have to's, these old stories. And so this movement towards steadiness, stillness, of being present for what's here is really powerful. It's really what we're doing when we practice. That's where liberation is, when we're not caught in craving or aversion, when we're not trapped by the hindrances. There's a book by Gregory Kramer and it's on the Eightfold Path, and it's called The Whole Life Path. I might have mentioned it when I was here before, but it's a really good book about the Eightfold Path as a householder, because we're not monastics. That I know anyone in here is monastic, but we're people who live lives and have to pay bills and food shop and deal with all the things that we deal with. And so it's kind of a really excellent take on that. But he says what this step is, samadhi is, he says the mind is gathered. Whether we're looking at one point, one thing, or in spacious awareness. We're settled and steady. And he used the phrase, the body-mind is calm. And I like that. The body-mind is calm. It's not just the mind, it's not just the body, but recognizing that it's a single unit, this body-mind. The mind-body connection, the heart-mind connection are steady and calm. So in Bhikkhu Bodhi, who also wrote a great book called The Noble Eightfold Path, which is kind of a classic if you've seen it, and it's really succinct and good. He said in samadhi, the mind is relaxed, centered, and happy. There's no struggle, no desire, no craving. The mind is alert, still, and stable. I see some of you going, what? Yeah, that's why it's like the last on the list. But I bet you've each had moments of that. I'm sure you've each had, I mean, it's not that I'm not enlightened, I'm not awakened, but I have experienced it. And they talk about like athletes who are, and especially now with the Olympics, in fact, I heard somebody talking about it this morning on the way out here, in the flow, in the zone, when you're so present for what you're doing, you're not distracted by other things. And you think about athletes or you think about musicians who've practiced for so long that what they're doing, it just is flowing. And I know you've done that, even if it's only for a moment or two. Or sometimes when you're watching a child play, or an animal, or a bird. You see, if you've ever gone on a residential retreat, you get what's called yogi mind, where you just I was on retreat last year up at Spirit Rock, and there all of a sudden everybody's standing on the path watching this coyote up in the hill stalk prey and eat it, and we were just like fully present for that interesting experience. But that's what this is like, when there's nothing pulling you in another direction, or you notice there's a story pulling you in, or something showing up, but you just let it go. You let it go because you're grounded and you're still where you are. It's really important that we recognize it, so that when you do recognize it, because it's vital for the arising of wisdom, this clarity. And wisdom is the first section of the Eightfold Path, which is seeing clearly the nature of existence, recognizing the Four Noble Truths, that there is dukkha, there is discomfort, there is the human condition, things are impermanent. And that we're constantly changing, we're conditioned beings. Things are arising and passing. So having that awareness. So these factors of the Eightfold Path support each other. So samadhi supports wisdom, and wisdom supports samadhi. And effort, which is part of the last factor of the last piece of the Eightfold Path, effort. Being willing to let go of our best ideas, our most no, you don't understand. Can you let it go? What would it be like to walk around without preconceived ideas of what's happening right now? Because that's not present. That's not an appropriate response to the moment. That's a response that was thought up years ago. And you're applying to now. It's like, is this really true? Is this true? So it's really, cultivating this samadhi is important. So if you read about samadhi and concentration, and you or listen to talks about it, you're probably also going to hear about the jhanas. People familiar with about the jhanas, which are these states of absorption where you're really concentrated. You're really, really, really concentrated. And there's a teacher, Lee Brasington, who teaches jhana retreats. I've never experienced jhana that I know of. And it's not necessary for enlightenment or liberation or freedom, but they talk about it a lot, and the Buddha talked about it a lot. In fact, Bhikkhu Bodhi talks about it in his book. He says, the four jhanas make up the usual textual definition of right concentration. Then the Buddha says that the first jhana is, you are secluded from sense pleasures and unwholesome states. A monk enters and dwells in the first jhana, which is accompanied by initial and sustained application of mind and filled with rapture and happiness born of seclusion. And then when this subsides, this second jhana enters into the second jhana, which is free from initial and sustained application, but still filled with rapture and happiness. And then rapture fades out, and you dwell in equanimity, and you enter into the fourth jhana. And then when you abandon pleasure and pain, and the disappearance of joy and grief, you dwell in the fourth jhana. And that's what the Buddha said is right concentration. But, and sometimes when you come new to practice, so that's really deeply concentrated practice. And as I said, I've never really experienced those that I know of. I've had moments perhaps of that, but not as that's something I would call jhanas. I was on a retreat early in my practice, and we had a meeting, a session with one of the teachers, and there were about 6 of us in a semicircle, and it started on the other end, and every single one of those people were saying they had talked about their jhana experiences, and of course I'm like, I don't have a jhana. And it's like, it's okay, what is your experience right now? It's like a lot of times you can get into comparing mind, and it's just like, let that go. Because it's really important, when you often, one other thing I'll say to that, no, I'll say it afterwards. Bhikkhu Bodhi says also what's really important to understand that jhanas aren't everything. He says, even so, these absorptions reached by the path of serenity meditation, as exalted as they are, still lack the wisdom of insight, and so are not yet sufficient for gaining deliverance. So jhana practice on its own is not going to take you to liberation, because it doesn't support insight or clear seeing or the growth of wisdom. Because what happens, if you think about it, when people are new to meditation, and this is true when you're teaching intro to meditation, especially when they're coming in with la 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 mind, you offer a concentration practice. And so when they say, just be with the breath, breathing in, breathing out, breathing in, breathing out, that's concentration because you're focusing on a particular thing. Or counting, that's also a technique that's offered for new folks. Count from 1 to 10 and then back down to 1. And you see that, you can sit for 45 minutes and not get past 3 without your head taking off. So that is really helpful. Or even if you have a long time of practice, and if your mind is really, really, really scattered, those little concentration practices are really helpful. However, insight practice, which is different from concentration practice, allows a broader opening and awareness. And then you're present, you can be present. You don't have to just be focused on a particular thing in order to get to this place of present time, of being where you are. You are more aware of what's happening, because you have an experience of being present and open, this broad, spacious awareness. So you can see what's arising as it's arising without needing a technique. There's this choiceless awareness. I think Sayadaw Tejaniya, who's a Burmese monk, talks about choiceless awareness, where you're just present for whatever it is. And you hear people talking about that when they're sitting and they're like, oh, there's a sound. The foot is tingling. The heart is beating. And so there's a real moment by moment awareness without being tied to one particular technique. So there's an openness to that allows you to have more freedom and more spaciousness. So when you're in the supermarket or driving, you can be present because you can recognize, oh, I'm getting caught up in thinking. I'm going to come back. Which is why I like the idea of samadhi being collectedness of mind and steadiness of mind. It's an equanimity. It's an equanimity that's really present.
So in that moment, Mary, what's your anchor?
You don't need an anchor. You don't need an anchor. The present time is your anchor. The question was, what's your anchor? The present. Right here, right now. What's right here? Yeah, thank you. That's a good question. What's your anchor? Because oftentimes it's like, what's your anchor? What's your anchor? You can come back if your mind is starting to become scattered. Come back to your breath. Come back to a sound. Come back to whatever you want to be. But I've talked to people who've been practicing for years and they're still doing breath. And it's like, you can open up and let that go. That's a way to steady, and then you can just let it all fall to the background and be present. Yeah. When I remember on a retreat years ago, the teacher said, and I think this is what, and I've been doing this ever since, when you sit down, it's like kind of doing an inventory. When you sit and you settle, what's here? What's present? So there's this openness to an invitation to knowing what's here and being with that. So samadhi is balanced also with sati, which is mindfulness. Sati is often translated as mindfulness, and it also means to be with. So you have the stillness of the mind, the steadiness coupled with mindfulness. And in fact, that moves into the 7 factors of awakening, which are, the 7 factors of awakening are the path to enlightenment. Another, lists. So you have mindfulness, which is the foundation, being present for what's here. And then investigation, curiosity. What's this? What's right here, right now? Not what am I thinking about, not what about when am I going to get a new car, or Miata, or what's for dinner, or whatever it is, or I can't believe they said that, or whatever is showing up. But what's right here? What's maybe underneath? Maybe there's an emotion. Maybe there's a toothache. When you get out of the thinking mind and you drop into the experience at hand. And then there's effort to stay. The next factor of awakening is staying where you are. The effort to stay, the effort to return, to recognize when you're caught up in thinking and to come back. And then there is the, when you begin to have that balance, then there's an ease, a joy that arises just from being where you are, even if nothing exciting is happening. And I've had those moments where and again, it's like being in the flow, or just sitting watching a flower, or I remember distinctly once my cat was in the backyard just jumping around, and I was just sitting there watching her. And then all of a sudden I realized, it's like, wow, this is really nice. And the Buddha talked about that when he was a young child, before his enlightenment, when he was still Siddhartha, before he sat under the Bodhi tree. He remembered when he was young, in that state of just being, without craving, without aversion, watching his father do something. And he was just there. And he said, how do we do that? And then he became enlightened, and we have all the teachings that flowed from his enlightenment and his clear seeing of how to move towards freedom. And so you have that joy of just being, which then moves to a place of tranquility and ease, regardless of what's happening. And I'm sure you've all been in moments of sadness or stress or something that's unpleasant, but have had a calmness about you. Because there doesn't have to be a reactivity. Oh, I have to punch this. I unfortunately had 3 people that I've known for over 40 years each pass away within a week and a half last month, or earlier this month. And it was like, oh, okay. Holding this, and then being with the emotions. Just making space in the stillness and a gratitude that there's this capacity now to hold those emotions. Which seems, doesn't it seem counterintuitive to have a gratitude for that? But it's such a tremendous freedom to not have to run away from grief, not have to run away from emotions or feelings, but to have the capacity to be present for our wholeness, our whole being. And then the next piece, the next factor of these factors of awakening is samadhi, this settledness, this steadiness. And then the final piece is equanimity. This steadiness, we're fully present, we're grounded, and we can respond appropriately to whatever shows up, with wisdom, with compassion, and with kindness. And so that is this path to liberation, to freedom from being stuck in our conditioned minds. And one thing that's really important, and Kramer points this out in his book, he says samadhi needs to be supported by sila. And sila is integrity and ethical behavior, and it's the middle section of the Eightfold Path, which is how we show up in the world. Wise action, wise speech, wise livelihood. Because you can be fully present, single-minded, grounded, focused, and really commit atrocities. We see it all the time. Obsession for something. So that's why there's this necessity to be grounded. And I know Joseph Goldstein talked about it too. He says mindfulness needs to have this ethical component. Because you can be mindful while you're punching somebody in the face, or set out to cause harm. We see that everywhere. We see that today, writ large. So to have this ethical component is incredibly important. Because in the factors of awakening, in sila, in ethical behavior, wise action, the precepts, don't kill intentionally, don't cause harm. But it's not just don't, it's cultivate compassion. Don't take what's not freely offered, cultivate generosity. It's an antidote to self, and it's a way to recognize how interconnected we all are. How interconnected we all are. Thich Nhat Hanh talks about interbeing. We inter-are. I watched a documentary yesterday. I went to a film festival, and it was this documentary was on the Reverend James Lawson, who some of you may know. He was the architect of the nonviolence part of the civil rights movement, and he worked with Dr. Martin Luther King, and he trained everyone in nonviolence before they sat down at the lunch counters in Nashville and South Carolina, North Carolina. And so he's the architect of nonviolence, and he's a Methodist minister, but he'd spent 3 years in India and really deeply studied Gandhi. And he just died a year ago, and I got to be in his presence a few times, but he talked about, and you know, he's a Methodist minister, a Christian, but it's this at its most fundamental level, this multiple faiths have this belief in this interconnectedness of us. You know, we inter-are. We look different, we live in different places, we like different foods, we love different people, we speak different languages, but we're all connected. We inter-are. And so to have that, and he talked about one of the things he was saying is, you know, and I've heard this in Buddhist teachings as well, if we truly are mindful, and if we truly recognize what harm, if we cause harm, what that does to the other person, we wouldn't do it anymore. When we're fully present for our experience, when we're fully connected. Because I think about some of the things I hear, the vile things people say about other people, and I say, how much self-violence do they have inside of themselves to shut themselves off from compassion for other beings? It's really, this is where the grounding in in ethical behavior and integrity is so important. And in fact, in traditional Buddhist countries, they teach ethics before they teach meditation, because it's really hard if you got this crap on your conscience to sit down and sit quietly, because at some point it's going to come bubbling up, and it can be untenable or unbearable at times. Have any of you felt guilty about stuff you did when you were 8 during a meditation practice? Sometimes. It's like, I can't believe I did that. It's just like, yeah. You know, most of the harm I have caused in my life is when I've been unmindful, when I've been driven by fear or the hindrances, wanting, not wanting. And so I caused a lot of harm in my life because I was not present. I wasn't aware of it, what was driving me, but in this awareness, it's like, oh, we see how the causes and conditions of our experience cause us to behave in certain ways. And when we move into this practice, we begin to see those causes and conditions, and the practice allows us to let them go. But we have to have this connectedness, this stillness, creating the conditions that allow this wisdom to arise. And then we have this calm body-mind, heart-mind, body-mind, mind-body. You know what I mean. This wise heart. That's Jack Kornfield's book, The Wise Heart. So that we're not just a brain and we're not just a heart. We have them working together in unison. So we're willing to let go of what doesn't serve, ground ourselves in ethical behavior. It's really a path that's can hold you beautifully. When we're caught in the hindrances, we're willing to let them go. When we calm the mind, we see reality. We let go because we see the futility of holding on. We care for others because we see we're all in this together. Gratitude, tranquility. And effort, again, it's gentle, there's no striving, it's really just allowing it to arise. And recognizing, I want to say this again, recognize when it's there. Recognize what it feels like when you're fully present in the moment. A teacher, a person I really liked a lot, Larry Ward, he passed away last year as well. He was wonderful, he was a student of Thich Nhat Hanh. Very wise, and he said he would go sit outside every morning wherever he lived, and he and his wife lived in multiple places. They moved like every year. They were all over the place, and he always sat outside in the morning and looked at nature and recognized how we were part of nature and just really grounded. So to have this intentionality, and I've tried to do it, I'm not going out every morning and sitting in the yard, but before I get out of bed, I'm trying to really just ground. Where am I right now? What's going on? I mean, it may not last long, but bringing intention is really important. That's another factor in the Eightfold Path. See, they're all working together. So that's it. We are willing to be with reality as it is, to see reality as it is, and be steady in it. We don't have to do all of it all at once. Just be where you are. Be where your feet are. And I think that's it. So I hope that this reflection on samadhi, concentration, this movement towards steadiness, movement towards being where you are, because there's nowhere else to be. I mean, of course we have to go through our lives, but this groundedness. That, wherever you, throughout the day, take a moment, find your feet. Just find your feet. Where are my feet? Ask the question, what's this? I taught this last night. I do a Saturday afternoon sit, and I was talking about this last night, and somebody at the end said she was like just eating all day long, and she had no idea why. She was just like, and then during class when I was saying, be curious, ask, what is this? She stops and she's like, oh, loneliness. I'm trying to fill this hole. So sometimes just asking the question, what is this? It's like when you have the hindrances, sometimes just recognizing, oh, that's greed, that's aversion, that's restlessness, that's worry. Awareness is so powerful, but you have to make the effort to go there. So thank you, my friends, as always, for your attention, your kind attention. And I'd love to know if there are any questions. And if there's a person in the room with a question, we'll have a microphone we can let you use. Okay. So unless there's anything else, why don't we close? I think many of you have gotten the beautiful, I apologize to y'all on Zoom. I didn't think to pull it up. See, this is why a Zoom host would be really helpful, because they could pull up the thing, which you can't see, online. But it's all right. You don't have to read along. You can just listen. This is a beautiful offering of merit that Ian wrote. Going forth into this world, so in need of light, may I bring all the kindness and wisdom I embody to each being and each situation that I meet. May the power of my practice today strengthen my resolve to be an agent of peace and justice in this world. Going forth together into this world, so in need of light, may we together bring all the kindness and wisdom we embody to each being and each situation that we meet. May the power of our practice today strengthen our resolve to be agents of peace and justice in this world. We dedicate our practice for the liberation of all beings, the great, the small, the wise, the ignorant, the powerful, and the powerless. May all beings be liberated from sorrow and loss, hatred and injustice, scarcity and want, and every form of suffering. May our practice today be a prayer for peace, and may it benefit all beings without exception. Thank you so much, my friends, and may you all be at ease.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone. It's good to see you. Take care.